There's a moment that almost every modern parent recognizes. It's the end of a long day. Your child melts down over something small. The wrong cup, the wrong color plate, the TV turning off. And suddenly, something inside you snaps too. Not because you don't love your child, not because you're impatient, but because you're exhausted in a way that sleep doesn't fix. And later, when the house is quiet, you replay the moment in your head. Why did that feel so hard? Why do I feel like I'm failing at something humans have done for thousands of years? Here's the truth most parents are never told. Parenting didn't suddenly become harder because parents became weaker. Parenting feels harder today because biology hasn't caught up with modern life. And once you understand that, deeply scientifically, something shifts. Not permission to disengage, but permission to stop blaming yourself. The dangerous lie parents absorb without realizing. Most parents carry an invisible belief. If I were more patient, more organized, more disciplined, this wouldn't feel so overwhelming. But that belief collapses under neuroscience, because the struggle modern parents feel is not a character flaw. It is a biological overload problem. Human parenting evolved for a world that no longer exists. And your nervous system knows it, even if no one ever explained it to you. Parenting is a nervous system task, not a moral one. Modern parenting advice often focuses on behavior. Be calme. Be consistent. Respond, don't react. Hold boundaries with empathy. All good advice, but incomplete, because none of it works if the parent's nervous system is already overwhelmed. According to decades of research from Harvard Center on the Developing Child, parenting is fundamentally a co-regulation process. A child does not learn emotional regulation in isolation. They borrow it from the adult nervous system around them. That means something uncomfortable but liberating. Your capacity to parent calmly is limited by your biological state, not your intentions. Why this generation of parents is uniquely overloaded. Let's compare biology versus environment. For most of human history, parenting happened in groups. Stress was acute, not chronic. Adult, shared, caregiving. Children adapted to adult rhythms. Today, parenting is isolated. Stress is constant and invisible. Parents are expected to be emotionally available all the time. Children's emotional needs are finally understood, but support systems are gone. This creates a perfect storm. Your brain is doing something evolution never prepared it for, raising a developing nervous system while suppressing your own stress response. The brain was not designed for this much input. Modern parents are managing financial pressure, digital overload, parenting information saturation, constant self-evaluation, social comparison, safety anxiety, productivity guilt. Neuroscience from NIH and APA shows chronic stress doesn't just make people tired. It shrinks cognitive flexibility, reduces emotional tolerance, and shortens the distance between stimulus and reaction. Which means, when your child cries loudly at the wrong moment, your brain doesn't say, "This is developmentally normal." It says, "I cannot handle one more demand." Not because you're weak, because your stress response system is already activated. Why toddlers trigger adults so intensely. Here's something rarely explained to parents. Toddlers are not just emotionally dysregulated. They are biologically contagious. A toddler's nervous system is immature. They rely on adults to regulate intensity, fear, frustration, and disappointment. But when a parent is already stressed, tired, or overstimulated, the toddler's distress doesn't feel neutral. It feels threatening. Not logically, neurologically. The amygdala doesn't differentiate between a predator, a deadline, a screaming toddler. It only detects overload. That's why parents say things like, "I don't recognize myself when I'm overwhelmed." Because that's not your reflective brain responding. That's your survival brain. What most parents are told versus what science shows. What parents are often told: stay calm. Your child needs you calm. What science actually shows? Calm is not a decision. It is a physiological state. You cannot think your way out of nervous system overload. Oxford research on emotional regulation confirms that regulation capacity drops sharply under chronic stress, even in highly educated, emotionally aware adults. So when parents feel shame for knowing better but doing worse, the shame is misplaced. Knowledge does not override biology. Why gentle parenting feels harder than traditional discipline. This part matters deeply. Older generations often say, we were disciplined and we turned out fine. But they're missing something critical. Traditional parenting relied heavily on fear compliance, emotional suppression, external control. It worked short-term, but at long-term emotional cost. Modern parents are trying to do something biologically harder. Teach emotional regulation instead of obedience. That requires emotional presence, nervous system stability, slower responses, higher self-awareness. In other words, it requires parents to do emotional labor previous generations were never asked to do, and they're doing it without support. Why parents feel guilty even when they're doing everything right. This generation of parents knows more about trauma, about attachment, about emotional safety, about brain development. But knowing more without systemic support creates chronic self-monitoring. And chronic self-monitoring activates the same brain circuits as anxiety. Harvard studies on parental stress show that parents who are highly invested in doing it right often experience higher burnout, not lower, because they are constantly evaluating themselves while parenting. That's not sustainable. Parenting burnout is not failure, it's biology. Parenting burnout is now recognized by psychologists as a real condition. Symptoms include emotional exhaustion, detachment, reduced sense of effectiveness, increased irritability, shame, and it disproportionately affects highly involved parents, parents without extended support, parents trying to break generational cycles, which means the parents who care the most often suffer the most. That's not irony, that's biology under pressure. The hidden cost of doing it alone. Humans evolved to parent in tribes. One adult regulated the child. Another regulated the adult. Modern parents have lost that second layer, which means you are regulating your child and yourself at the same time, all day long. No nervous system is designed for that without recovery. And yet parents wonder why they feel depleted. A subtle reframe that changes everything. Here's a quiet truth neuroscience offers. Your child does not need perfection. They need repair. And repair does not require endless patience. It requires presence after rupture. Studies on attachment from both Harvard and longitudinal research show that secure attachment is built not by never getting it wrong, but by returning, reconnecting, and repairing. That means your moments of struggle are not ruining your child. They are opportunities, if handled with honesty and reconnection. Why presence matters more than performance. Modern parents feel pressure to respond perfectly, use the right language, avoid mistakes. But children don't experience parenting as a checklist. They experience it as felt safety. And safety is transmitted through tone, posture, pace, and emotional availability, not scripted responses. A regulated presence matters more than a perfect phrase. The beginning of relief. If parenting feels harder than you expected, if you feel like you're failing despite trying harder than ever, if you love your child deeply but feel stretched thin, science doesn't see a broken parent. It sees a biological system under a natural pressure. And that changes the story entirely. There's something most parents don't expect. As their child grows, it doesn't just activate love, it activates memory. Not memory you can clearly recall, but memory your nervous system remembers. Moments of stress with your toddler don't stay in the present. They quietly pull your own childhood forward. And suddenly, you're not just responding to your child, you're responding to echoes inside yourself. This is where parenting becomes biologically complex and emotionally heavy. Why your child's emotions wake up your past. Neuroscience has a term for this. Implicit memory. These are emotional memories stored not as stories, but as sensations. Tightness, panic, shutdown, urgency, shame. Research from Harvard and long-term attachment studies show that when parents are under stress, the brain often defaults to early learned emotional patterns. Not because parents want to repeat the past, but because stress reduces access to the reflective brain. So when a toddler screams, refuses, or collapses emotionally, the adult brain sometimes hears more than noise. It hears you're losing control. This is unsafe. You're failing. Those messages didn't come from your child. They came from your nervous system's history. Why toddlers are emotional earthquakes. Toddlers are not just learning language or motor skills. They are building the architecture of emotional regulation. The part of the brain responsible for impulse control, perspective, and emotional modulation, the prefrontal cortex, is profoundly immature in toddlers. That's not a delay, that's design. Harvard Center on the Developing Child explains that toddlers experience emotions at nearly full intensity, without the neurological breaks to manage them. So when your toddler cries over a broken cracker, the distress is real, neurologically real. Not exaggerated, not manipulative, not dramatic, just unfiltered. Behavior is not a moral problem. This is where parenting advice often goes wrong. When behavior is framed as disrespect, manipulation, défiance, parents respond with control. But when behavior is understood as neurological overload, emotional immaturity, stress response, parents respond with regulation. Science is clear on this point. Children do not learn regulation through correction. They learn regulation through co-regulation. What co-regulation actually means, not the Instagram version. Co-regulation is not letting children do whatever they want, never setting boundaries, being endlessly calm. Co-regulation is a biological process where a regulated nervous system supports a dysregulated one. It happens through tone of voice, facial expression, body language, proximity, predictability, not lectures, not explanation, not logic. Oxford research on emotional development shows that children internalize regulation only after experiencing it externally, repeatedly. That means toddlers don't calm down because you tell them to. They calm down inside your calm. Why parents feel like they're losing control. Here's something deeply validating. When a child is dysregulated, the adult nervous system often mirrors it automatically. This is called emotional contagion, and it's mediated by mirror neuron systems. Your body responds before your mind catches up. That's why parents say, I knew what to do, but I couldn't do it in the moment. That's not a failure of willpower. That's biology doing what biology does. The impossible standard modern parents face. Modern parents are expected to heal generational trauma, raise emotionally intelligent children, stay calm under constant stress, be present, productive, patient, and gentle. Do it mostly alone, all while living in a culture that values performance over rest, punishes imperfection, offers advice without support. No nervous system thrives under that. Parenting didn't become harder because parents forgot how to love. It became harder because the load exceeded biological capacity. Why rest is not optional, it's regulatory. Here's something countercultural but science-backed. Regulation cannot happen without recovery. NIH research on stress physiology shows that without adequate recovery, the nervous system stays in a heightened state, which means less patience, more reactivity, shorter emotional fuse. Rest isn't a luxury for parents, it's a requirement for regulation. And rest doesn't only mean sleep, it means reduced cognitive load, emotional support, moment without responsibility, nervous system downshifts. Without that, parenting advice doesn't stick. Repair, the most underrated skill in parenting. Parents often fear yelling, snapping, disconnecting, but research on secure attachment reveals something surprising. Children don't need parents who never rupture. They need parents who repair. Repair looks like coming back, naming what happened, reconnecting emotionally, not long explanations, not self-blame, just honest reconnection. That teaches children relationships survive conflict. Emotions don't end connection. Safety can be restored. Those lessons last longer than perfect behavior ever could. Why presence beats performance every time. Children don't experience parenting through strategy. They experience it through sensation. Your child remembers how your voice felt, how your body felt, whether you returned, not whether you used the perfect phrase. Presence communicates safety. Performance communicates pressure. And pressure is the opposite of regulation. The quiet truth parents need to hear. You are not behind. You are not failing. You are not broken. You are parenting in a system that demands more than biology was built to give. Understanding this doesn't lower standards. It humanizes them. And from that place, change becomes possible, not forced. What actually helps parents regulate. Not hacks, not scripts, not perfection. What helps? Lowering internal pressure, building realistic expectations, prioritizing nervous system health, seeking connection, not control, choosing repair over shame. These are not soft ideas. They are biologically sound. The bigger picture. When parents heal regulation, children inherit it, not through words, through nervous system learning safety together. That is how cycles change. Quietly, imperfect, honestly. Closing moment. Retention plus reflection. If parenting feels harder than you were prepared for, if your reactions surprise you, if you care deeply but feel stretched thin, this is not proof you're doing it wrong. It's proof you're doing something profoundly human, raising a developing brain with your own, and that was never meant to be easy.